Hola, amigo. Hi, I'm sorry. I was about to tell you. Welcome. My name is Susana Salguero, and I work here in the Inter-American Scout office as an executive for operations. Oh, thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking about this whole April. We've been talking about notes on diversity and inclusion. You've been part of the email marketing campaign that we had. I hope you have some clues and you have started reading the guides of inclusion and diversity. And well, we're going to be talking about this with the expert that we have here in the regional office. His name is Jesus Arenas. He's part of the staff and he is the specialist that has been developing this whole topic throughout these whole years. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have some questions. And well, I'll let him to present himself. So why is it important to talk about diversity and inclusion? Well, it is important. We're having some problems for him to connect it. Jesus, are you there? I'm sorry. So we came up here. We're having some turbulence. Can you wait for us a little bit longer? But I'm gonna start talking about diversity and inclusion itself. So it was approved as one of the strategic priorities in 2014 in Slovenia as part of the process that we wanted to be growing and we wanted to be doing other type of stuff because we needed to reach out to more people, and that is basically the principle of doing this. It's and well, when it was adopted by that, we started adopting it here in the Inter-American region. And
hello everyone, can you listen now?
yes, so we have already to Jesus is up here. So I hope you enjoyed these presentations. If you have any questions or do so, I will let himself to introduce himself. So
Okay, first of all, thank you for your patience. And as you know, technology sometimes is not as friendly as we want it to be. And first of all, I would like to know, Susana, does the PowerPoint it's in clearly?
no, we're just seeing blue right now.
Okay, just a moment.
Ah, now we can see it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Let me put in full screen. Let me know about, is it better now?
No, it goes on blue.
Okay, but can you see it on full screen right now?
No.
Okay, what about now?
Right now, yes. I think it's gonna be better if you just stay like that and we go
Leave
through
it that
down.
way?
Yes, it's gonna be better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so Hello, once again, everyone from Inter America, and I'm glad to be here with you once again. And this evening, we will be talking about our diversity and inclusion guide that has been published for about a couple of years now. And as you know, this guide was a product that was obtained um, after the development of the first diversity and inclusion symposium that was held here in Panama. So let's start and let's give you information about what is the guide. The guide is a document which offers the establishment of basis for the development of guidelines which adequately address issues of inclusion and diversity in scouting. Why do we have this guide? As you all know, by the year 2023, Scouting wants to be the leading educational youth movement in the world, allowing 100 million young people to become active citizens. That's why we need to be inclusive and diverse in order to contribute to this goal. So basically, if we want to be diverse and inclusive, we of course need tools as this one that gave us an idea of what we need to do in order to achieve this, to contribute to this goal. Say this guide pretends to be considered as an initial reference, a concrete tool that gathers a set of proposals that invite us to become closer and act increasingly to have a broader, more inclusive, and diverse Scout movement for all. With this that I have just said, is not that we are going to give you a magic recipe. As you heard what I just mentioned, we will be giving you some comments, some proposals that you have to adapt in each of your countries, taking into consideration the society that you are living in. Okay, so let's move into the first part of our diversity and inclusion guide, which is rethink ourselves as a diverse and inclusive organization. Let's start by asking ourselves if in fact we are a National Scout organization that not only promotes diversity and inclusion, but if we also have a platform to actually achieve this. Some of the questions that we can ask ourselves in order to know if we are a really diverse and inclusive organization are, as an example, does our National Scout organization have managed to have an active and significant presence in territories and communities that have traditionally been served? Do we guarantee that our volunteers have the necessary expertise to address the issue of diversity and inclusion? Do we have included in our annual budget specific items to support people with disabilities, the minorities, and vulnerable groups? Those three questions are just an example of one of the other questions that you can find in our guide. Okay, so now you can see that those questions are very open and invite us to reflect about ourselves. Let's move now into looking at the institutional positioning on diversity and inclusion. To be inclusive, it is not enough to talk about the issue and promote it. This must be contained in our institutional documents, be in agreement with the fundamental principles of the movement, regulations and resolutions of WASM, and the national and world principles to which we are committed to contribute as active members of our societies. Say this, we have to follow all these regulations in order to help to contribute all of the different aspects that are included in the diversity and inclusion. An institutional vision could answer the following questions, just as an example. For and why we want to be inclusive and for whom. The current level of inclusion and the desired level in the medium term. The social project in which we wish to be a participant. The level of preparation for inclusion that currently exists in the NSO. The institutional role and level of responsibility in building resilient communities that we want to become part of. Now let's talk about the inclusion of people with disabilities in Scouting. Have you ever considered what contributions can we obtain from people with disabilities in our institutional life? For example, what can we obtain from them if we include in the development of our program, our training, and our administration? The attention to people with disabilities starts from the appropriate language we apply. As an example, we can say that the person is not disabled but has a disability. This means that the disability can occur due to the lack of adaptation in their environment, limiting them to a better access to opportunities rather than the characteristics of themselves. So what we're saying right here is that we need and we're invited to adapt our program, our activities in order to have a better access for everyone. Here you can see the different types of the disabilities that we have categorized. Now let's mention what are the best practices which enhance the inclusion of people with disabilities. Thinking in our approach to the issue of diversity and inclusion gives us, as a result, whether or not if we are able to accommodate people with some type of disability. Obtaining the answer that we are not in capacity is not entirely about result. On the contrary, it encourages us to improve in order to make the necessary adjustments to facilitate the entry of a group in equal need of attention in our activities. Among the best practices that we can mention, we can say, always include the family or responsible person in the inclusion process. Eliminate as much as possible the stigma of overprotection. Take into account that disability occurs in all stages of our lives, childhood, youth, and adulthood. In all of them, we deserve to include everyone. Of course, taking into consideration the necessary care for each group. We also need to share our experiences of success and also our challenges that we have overcome already and the challenges that we want to overcome. Okay, now let's talk about the inclusion of persons in vulnerable situations. Do you know what it's a person that is living in a vulnerable situation? Everyone is considered vulnerable. You, me, we can be vulnerable at some point of our lives. The Economic Commission for Latin America states that the vulnerability is the result of exposure to risk coupled with the inability to face and the inability to actively adapt to its consequences. For example, people that is living in a conflict in a country that is facing a war, that's one example of vulnerability. Vulnerability can also be explained in a very simple mathematical equation. Vulnerability is equal to the exposure to the risk plus the inability to confront those risks plus the inability to adapt actively. We have also to mention that we have two types of factors that makes a person vulnerable: the internal aspects and the external aspects. As you can see in this image that we are presenting you, we have two columns. The internal, that are called the endogenous factors, can be illness or health conditions, disability, sex or gender, sexual identity or sexual preference, or even religion. Sounds simple, right? But those simple things can be a very big difference from one society to the other and from one country to the other. Among the external factors, we can mention the generalized violence, difficulties of access to the education system, political persecutions and wars, and situation of migration or human mobility. The next chapter of our guide is the inclusion of persons belonging to minority groups. There is no international consensus of what a minority is. However, including in our diversity and inclusion guide, we have used the definition given in 1977 by Francesco Capotorti and then adopted by the Subcommission of Prevention of Discrimination and Protection of Minorities, which is a numerically smaller than the rest of the population of a state group, which is not in a dominant position and whose members are nationals of the state. They have different ethnic, religious, or linguistic characteristics from the rest of the population, and they only have a sense of solidarity with themselves. They take care of their culture, their traditions, their religion, or their language. We can also have a few questions related to the minorities. For example, who do we consider a minority? Do you know that in some countries, even indigenous peoples are considered minorities? Let's take an example with this special topic. Countries as Bolivia and Peru, they have a very large population of indigenous people. In some countries, indigenous peoples are considered a minority. In some other countries, women are still considered a minority. Something more relevant and more actual to our times is the refugees that are still considered a minority. But more than a number, all those examples that I have just gave you, is that we need to take into consideration that these people are not included into the development and in the decision making of the societies in which they live. That's why we can call a minority, have an active participation in the society. The next chapter of our guide tells us about the best practices that attend the process of inclusion of persons in vulnerable groups and minorities. Some of the best practices that we can share with you are: avoid the welfare activities. By welfare, we understand those social welfare options as being temporary and solidarity. They create dependency on the target population instead of sustainability. Also, we can mention the development of strengthening of social inclusion. We have to give the importance that this issue of what this issue represents. This must be contained within the training scheme and at the different levels of training. We also need to identify our possible limitations. Possible limitations can be structural or technical. Also, we need to have very clear that we cannot address everything by our own. We need to create agreements with external actors in order to have a proper attention for vulnerable people, for disabled people, and for all the rest of the population that we want to include in our organization. One big example that we have been sharing with you since a couple of years ago is the big effort that we have developed alongside with Special Olympics. We have a regional agreement, not only with them, but with so many other organizations. But with them, of course, we are addressing directly a population that is related to this topic. Also, we need to develop actions that include vulnerable people and minority groups. Include people of vulnerable with vulnerability and that are part of minority groups. It doesn't mean that we need to open immediately our membership to them. No, we have to take sometimes baby steps. For example, we can be developing activity alongside with I don't know, maybe a refugee camp if you have it in your country. Just as an example, we can develop a full day of activities with them. In that way, they will be experiencing what scouting is about, and we will also be knowing about that group that we have no idea how to deal with. Finally, there are some transversal concepts related to diversity and inclusion that we have never forget, and we mentioned those in our diversity and inclusion guide. Those concepts are: raise awareness about discrimination. Of course, discrimination is very related to inclusion. If we discriminate, we will not be including anyone. We also need to protect our children, our youth, and our adults. One mechanism to protect our membership is the application of the Safe from Harm policy. Also, we need to educate and train in resilience. You may be asking, what is resilience? Resilience is the ability of human beings to survive and overcome having been exposed to adverse events. We also need adult volunteers as promoters of the topics of diversity and inclusion. But of course, we need to be focusing in human rights. Diversity and inclusion starts with this: human rights. Please be very clear with these two words: human rights. This is the base of what we are always talking about. Also, we mentioned before, we need cooperation and networking. But we don't also need external actors, as I mentioned before when I gave you the example of Special Olympics. You can ask the opinion or take the successes or maybe the challenges of another group in your countries. Or maybe you can contact another country in order to ask them how they address a specific topic. But how do we do that? We need to share our cases of success. If we don't do that, anyone will not be asking how we do that. Okay, folks, so this is everything that I have to say to you so far. So if there's any comment or any idea that you would like to share, please let me know.
Hi, Jesus. So we have a question over here, right?
Yes.
So we have one question that says, how can we contact people or means in order for include a little bit more, um, to have an inclusive perspective towards groups? I mean, is there someone we can call? It you recommend that we do it just by ourselves, or we should contact? Who should we contact in our NSOs?
Well, as you know, we have sent since the last year to the all the representatives in the NSOs of the region, the international commissioners, the presidents. We have sent, for example, the diversity and inclusion survey, and they gave us it was very well answered. So you can contact your headquarters, your national headquarters, in order to know what they are doing. And also, if they, let's say something, you don't have to wait until people give you a notification of anything. You also have the power to ask. You can ask them, what are we doing and why we haven't doing why we have why we haven't been doing it yet. So in that way, we will be pushing our annual plan to attend this topic that haven't been addressed.
So we have another question from the audience as well. It's how can if you can actually choose something that a scout group can start working on, which one would you choose? And which one you should recommend for a small group that has zero resources and have zero experience, but how should they start to be having this inclusive and
Yeah,
diverse perspective?
good. Good question. If I have to choose anything from everything that I have said, the first thing that you need to do is to have to develop a program that help us to reduce the stigmas and also the discrimination. In that way, people will be changing their mindsets, and also they will have another ideas, and also they will be knowing another people that maybe right now they are refusing to even communicate. So that will be my first recommendation. Educate people with, as I mentioned before, baby steps. As you know, as everyone knows, scouting is for all. So we have to practice that. We have to be aware that some of these of the people with the characteristics that I have mentioned, disability, people that it's moving from the countries of origin for any situation, maybe tomorrow they will be coming and will be knocking on our door. And if we are not prepared and we don't know how to even communicate with that people, then we will be failing even in how to interact.
Hi, hello. Thank you. So we don't have any more questions from our audience, Jesus. Thank you for this really good topic. I hope the ones that have joined us to this webinar, you can still connect to the different emails that we're going to be sending to you. So basically what I'm sharing right now on the screen is that today we took out also the newsletter, the regional newsletter that talks about some good practices along diversity and inclusion. So if you want to join, you want to see something, you want to learn something, and you want to implement something within your country or your scout group, you can also read about this and get inspired. We all here to have one vision. Thank you for connecting. Thank you, Jesus, for everything.
Thank you.
Well, and thank you for our audience. Thank you for joining us today. And see you.
Bye.
And we're going to talk it by email.
See you.